My journey to the Orthodox Church. So I was raised in a non-denominational church, and when I was born, I was actually baptized at a Taiwanese Presbyterian church, and I had a cultural godfather, I guess you could say, because it wasn't within that church, but he was a Greek guy. He was Orthodox, and he was a coworker of my dad. I believe they'd moved away, and so I didn't see them very much growing up beyond maybe like age 4, but I always had this baptismal cross from my godfather, and it was the only kind of like tradition that I had in relation to religion. And I always loved that cross, and it was around my neck permanently until I got baptized into the Orthodox Church. And I feel like it set me on some sort of trajectory to love and pursue tradition. I always loved the story my dad would tell me about having been given that. And I always dreamt of, oh, man, I can't wait to like have this and pass this down to my own children, that sort of thing. And so I kind of had this longing for that growing up. In the non-denominational church, obviously there's nothing like that. My church growing up was this campus church. It was, a lot of kind of like hippie-esque people, and I never really seemed to mesh well with them. I'll get back to this later. Ultimately, I go through middle school, high school, and I have some Greek classmates, and one of them was Yanni Petitsis. He was a great friend of mine growing up. We played soccer together all the way through high school, and his twin sister, Mavreta, she moved 45 minutes away from me after I graduated. I moved down south with the objective of being around more Christians, and so I book it down south, and I'm going to mega churches, and initially I'm like, this is great, there's so many like normal people in contrast to what I was used to back in Ohio. Over time, I kind of began to realize that you can go to 2 or 3 dating series sermons before the whole kind of concept of church being directed towards young people gets old. And I need to start pushing myself. My faith is the most important thing to me, but I don't feel like I'm growing here. And so I reached out to a mentor of mine from university, and he had a church recommendation for me because this particular church belonged to the same Baptist conference. My tendency was to pursue something more traditional. What's the next step from non-denominationalism? Finding something that is an actual denomination. When you think Baptist, you don't think of the most traditional denomination, but this particular church was kind of an offshoot. They were doing their own thing, but it was beautiful. The pastor there, Pastor Bill, shout out to you, Pastor Bill, if you're watching this, very intelligent, and I grew very close to him, and he was doing his best to push me to put my faith at the center of my life, which, I thought I was doing, and I was making an effort to do. Sitting down with him, every other week, I began to kind of learn a lot of his critiques of evangelicalism when I would ask about, hey, maybe I should go back to that mega church. I don't really have any friends here still. I'm so lonely, honestly. Like, I just want to go back to where there's people my age. He encouraged me to stick around, not just because he was the lead pastor there, but because he could see me growing, and I felt the same way, and so I stuck it out. He had this kind of like pseudo liturgy that he'd created, and we took communion weekly there, which was unorthodox for a Baptist church, and the importance of that was expressed by him. I really began to kind of like appreciate the sacraments because of him. At the time, Mavreta, the twin sister of my buddy Yanni, she moved like 45 minutes from me, and so she invites me out to a paroxysm service, and it's just middle of the week, late night, and I'm there, and it's just us and 5 or 6 other people, and I was like, wow, this is such a beautiful service. Like,
By the mercy, compassion, and love for mankind, of your only begotten Son, with whom you are blessed.
I don't know, it just felt like my heartstrings were being pulled being there. It was gorgeous. I'd never seen iconography just plastered all over the walls, and I loved just the tradition, I guess. And it's funny too, because you'll see how God uses different things to bring people into the church, and for me it was kind of just the essence, the rituals, the tradition, the art, the iconography. It was gorgeous, and I'm not an artsy person, but I feel like I have a stylistic eye, and so this really drew me in. Ultimately, I went home and was like, okay, this is way too different for me. I don't know that that's ever going to be my thing, but maybe I could find something more in between that's still considered Protestant. I don't really go on to do much searching. Anytime I'm at home with my roommates and we're talking about Christianity or theology, I kind of started to reference what the Orthodox do as a place of authority, unknowingly. And I do this a couple times, and one of my roommates was actually just like, hey, have you ever considered converting to Orthodoxy yourself? And I was like, nah, honestly, Not really. It's too out there for me, but they're like the ancient Christians. So I'm going to continue to like refer to them when it comes to who has authority, which is just kind of foretelling of what was bound to happen. Ultimately, I returned to an Orthodox church, but instead in my city. And this was a couple months later. The first thing that I see upon entering is a guy around my age in the back of the pews, and he's just crying his eyes out. And this is during Orthros, so there aren't many people there. Their chanters are chanting something beautiful. Just feels so reverent and serious, and like a place you can actually go to mourn and to grieve. I didn't feel like I had to be smiley 24/7 or just like a fake happy, and it felt so raw and real. It still feels a little too out there for me, and I go to brunch with a bunch of folks that are inquirers that are all converting from different Protestant denominations, and I start chatting with them about their experience. They start laying down all the history of the church on me, and keep in mind, I'd never even heard of the councils before. I'd never even heard the phrase apostolic succession. This was all completely new to me, so I just get all this information dumped on me at once. I go home, begin doing research, and I'm so overwhelmed. I'm like, yeah, I don't know if that's for me. Another time. And I wind up going to the gym and running into one of these guys that was at brunch with me a few weeks later. And so I start chatting with him, come around a couple months after that. So I think at this point it had been 6 months since I'd been to Paroccleses with my friend Mavreta. So I wind up returning to the church. I also began attending the catechism class as an inquirer. And by the time we're asked to become, actual catechumen, I'm locked in. I'm 100% at this point. And then I got baptized, and now I have a godfather within the church. Just a wild series of events that I feel like led me here, and honestly have encouraged me to want to share with all of you, because had I not had friends that were Greek growing up, had I not had people kind of like give me these crumbs along the way, it would be very intimidating, especially if I was raised in a church and had parents that were very eager to have their children stay within their denomination, right? And so I didn't have these walls up, and I just want to share my experience and hopefully show to you why the Orthodox Church is the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church.